Back to Ghost. All the way across forecheck. In front. They score! Patrick tips it home. It's a 4-3 hockey game as the kid seems to be enjoying it on the top power play unit. 3-point game for Patrick.
PhillySportsNetwork.com and Wildfire Radio bring you yet another version of the O&B Puckcast, this time episode number 43, and we have the Flyers trade deadline review. And it sounds like we have a smoke alarm going off in the background. That must be your house, Dan the Flyer fan.
It is not, but I do hear it, though, so hopefully somebody's not on fire right now.
Yes.
The Flyers are on fire right now.
That is
appropriate.
It's the burning question, yes. Okay, that fell flat. And also we have with us from the outset, from the fourthperiod.com, NHL correspondent focused on the Philadelphia Flyers, our friend Anthony DiMarco. How are you, Anthony?
Not too bad, guys. How's everyone doing?
Okay, well, we're going to have Dave Pagnotta and Dennis Bernstein on directly. We're going to kind of sum up this trade deadline from a national perspective, and then we're going to talk about the Flyers, what they did, what they almost did. That's interesting. And maybe some seeds that were planted for the summer. And this is the kind of stuff that you find out when you talk to league executives, scouts, agents, so on and so forth. But, gentlemen, let's talk about the Flyers making the trade for Wayne Simmonds. We'll get to that with the TFP crew when Dave and DB come on board. But they come out yesterday in one of their better efforts of the year against a very hungry Buffalo Sabres team on a back-to-back, needing a victory just like the Flyers. Very workmanlike effort. Dan, what was your impression of last night's game?
You know, I think that it was good that they came out with some kind of fire. You know, they are, falling behind a little bit in the standings here. And the fact that they can still come out and put on a good performance, it shows that they are going to fight till the very end here until they are mathematically out. So it was good to see. It was good to see Hartman come in and play some, some Flyer hockey. So I think that he may end up fitting in here at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I look at Hartman as a guy. I said to myself, it's like a grittier version of Lawton and maybe has some more straight line speed. And hopefully, fingers crossed, Anthony, he's got a little bit more of a scoring touch.
Well, yeah, he scored 19 goals in his first year with Chicago. He was a first-round pick with Chicago. And Nashville believed high in him, too. They gave up a first-round pick to get him last year. I like the deal a lot. I think you get a player for Simmonds who plays a similar type of role. Maybe he won't achieve as much offensive success as Simmonds did in his early years in Philadelphia. But I like the fact that a guy can step in right away, make an impact, and who knows? He's still 24 years old, and as of right now, he's playing Flyers hockey and really impressing.
Yeah, I agree. Shep, he's out there in the interview saying, hey, I'm only 24, and he sounds like a guy who's got a lot to prove. And I put it out there that I think from here on out, he's at least going to match Simmonds' production, while in terms of shot metrics and skating and the pace of play, he could actually be a more effective player.
Oh, sure. Obviously, you looked at it, and whether it was actual or was just visual, it didn't matter. Either way, it looked like the Flyers were a heck of a lot faster last night. He's very aggressive in his forechecking. I love that. And, overall, he saw two teams give up on him a little bit. You know what I mean? And with the stigma of being a first rounder, I honestly believe that this kid has got something to prove. And I think he's going to prove it with this team because I think Chicago, when they drafted him, he might have fit in with their plans at the beginning, and then they thought there's a saving opportunity to get him for a first-round pick somewhere, so they do that. And I don't ever think he fit in with their gameplay with their, maybe not their style, but he just didn't find a home in Nashville. So I think he's found a home here, though.
Well, and then Nashville needed certain elements, and they weren't going to get them from a player who was struggling to score. I think you had a very similar situation with Kevin Fiala, who's a more talented player, but Nashville's ready to win now, so they flipped Fiala for Granlund. And between that and Simmons, their power play is like 27th in the league or 31st or something in there. And they had to make a change. But Dan, I was reading it, you were a little bit underwhelmed by the trade. To start with, do you feel any differently having watched him play or maybe having some time to think about it?
I think at first it was more just that's it kind of thing. But I've had time to sit on it. I watched a bit of the game last night as well. And I think he's a guy, I think Simmons is a guy that they got, honestly, I think they got a decent value for him given the season that he's had. He's certainly not the guy that we've been watching for the past, 5, 6, 7 years. So at the end of the day, it is what it is. I wish they could have gotten a little something better, but I'm not overly disappointed and not nearly as angry as I was when it went down.
No, I definitely get it. I mean, listen, it's not Wayne Simmons' fault. It's not a lot of the Flyers' fault. That Paul Holmgren and Ron Hextall didn't do their jobs. And Anthony, that's the big question as we wait for Dave and DB. We're really curious, not only the behind the scenes of what happened on Monday and leading up to it, but what kind of seeds might have been planted for the summer. I'm really anxious to hear about that stuff.
Well, Fletcher said it, that they will make their additions in the summer and that they have a lot of cap room to maneuver in the summer. I think that this deal shows that Fletcher isn't just thinking about the long-term future, as we saw so many years with Haxtell. He went and got a player who is an NHLer right now, who will make an impact right now. And I think that is why they didn't get a second-round pick. They didn't just get a B-level prospect plus a second-round pick. They got a bona fide NHLer with a fourth-round pick that could become a third-round pick. So I think that Fletcher is keen on making moves in the summer. I think he is undoubtedly going to be in the hunt for a top 4 defenseman, preferably a right shot, and I think the Flyers do want to compete as soon as next year. They're sick of hearing this 2 to 3 year business, and I think as soon as this summer comes, Fletcher will want to improve this team instantly.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. If he fills some of these needs, I mean, how many times, Chef, have we talked about we're kind of 2 to 3 years away from being 2 to 3 years away? That's a very common sentiment on Twitter, and it seems like, I think of Dave Scott's talking points when Hextall was fired. He wanted to hire somebody who had a, quote, bias for action.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you could see, look, I get the trade, how people can be upset about it. But he did do something, and he made the team better. You gotta like at least like that, because, and the talk about the whole Simmons thing too, I think that because we love the player, and sometimes our emotions get involved, and I tweeted this out, and I had to explain to some people, like, look, you're placing your heart in part of your evaluation for Wayne Simmons. He is not, he's not going to get you that yield that you once thought you was. I mean, he's not, like Dan said, he's not the player he was 3-4 years ago. Hell, he's not even the player he was last year. So his value, I think we attach a higher value to it. And because of that, we got what we got. We got something good out of it. I think both teams will end up winning out in this trade this year. Now, down the road, I think the thing is going to change there. And I think Fletcher will be very aggressive come, July.
Yeah, we're definitely hoping so. And I think of a couple of years ago, there were 2 players that were toward the end of the draft. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. Morgan Klimchuk and Hunter Shinkaruk. In a very typical draft that happened, I think it was, I don't know, Anthony, I don't know if you remember that draft, but those are guys that are drafted right around the time, the same, part of the draft. as Hartman was. And whatever happened, what I'm saying is a late first round pick, it sounds good, but a lot of those guys don't make it. For every Ricard Raquel, there's, 10 Hunter Shinkaruks and Morgan Klimchuks. It's better to have a guy who is a third liner that can play in the league than some second or third round pick, even though it's not as sexy on trade deadline day.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that notion 100%. Hartman is a guy who has already established himself as a bona fide third line guy. And as you mentioned, on trade deadline day, you get a second round draft pick plus a prospect who could become that. Well, you know what? I think that sometimes getting a guy, a roster player who has already established himself as that, is way better. First round picks often flop. It happens. But Fletcher got a guy who will be in the NHL next year. He's in the NHL this year. He made an impact last night. And I think that it was a good move to make. I think the Flyers have enough prospects to last them for the next 5 years. And it was nice to see that for once he made a deal that, although it is for the future, as Hartman is only 24 years old, it also signifies that he cares about the now, as Hartman is ready to play as of right now.
Yeah, that draft was 2013. So that goes to show you that, that you had Shinkaruk at 24 and Klimchuk at 28. So it just, neither one of those guys is ever going to be anything, and we know that Ryan Hartman should be a contributor. And Anthony, we have somebody on the phone calling from somewhere out there in the west coast of California. Would that be the senior writer from the fourthperiod.com, Dennis Bernstein?
That is, in fact, correct. You guessed right on the first try.
Well, Dennis, welcome to the OMB Puckcast. How's it going? Dennis is my mentor. He was the guy who brought me into the fourth period. So Isaiah's the host, so you guys go right ahead with it.
Well, we go right to the top of the board on the fourthperiod.com. And what do we see? We see Mark Stone goes to Las Vegas.
Right.
And boy, I tell you, you look at the watch list. I love, after the draft, these watch lists are terrific. And let me interrupt there for a second, because we are joined by, Anthony, I'll give it to you.
Dave, you there, buddy?
Yes, sir. How's it going?
Not too bad, man. So David Pagnotta, the top dog as far as TFB personnel goes, is now with us.
And it's a TFB invasion. It's a TFB takeover. Let's go.
We've been taken over.
And a fellow Canadian for a change. So Dave, Isaiah's the host, and I know they're excited to have you and DB on.
Oh, we're happy. Definitely happy to be on, for sure.
Yeah, welcome to the OMB Puckcast. It's great to have you guys on. I listened to you on Off the Rush on Sirius XM NHL with Nick Alberga. It's a terrific show. I never miss it. So great to have you.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to say that. And you guys do great work on this podcast as well.
Oh, fantastic. Dave, before we get into things, I was just telling Dennis, we're going to go through your website. I love this recap, these trade watch lists. And then you go back like a day or two afterwards. And we were talking about Mark Stone, and we know he goes to Las Vegas. What we love is the drama. Like, where did he almost go? What almost happened? Fans love this stuff, and they eat it up. I know I do.
Yeah. Well, so do we. We try to dig as much as we can to figure out where everybody, could potentially end up, what came close, what fell through, who told off who. During these negotiations, things can certainly get intense. But not just with Stone, but some of the other players that were out there. Obviously, he can only go to one team, or these players can only go to one team. So, the rest of them that are in the mix kind of, lose out. But for Mark Stone, the New York Islanders were right there. They really wanted to get their hands on him. It seemed like the money on the extension was the biggest issue for the most part. It sounded like they had the parameters of a deal in place from a trade perspective, but no extension. meant no deal and didn't happen. He goes to Vegas.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, they had to. The only thing that made sense, if you're going to pay a guy that much money at this time of year, and even if you're a dark horse Stanley Cup candidate, DB, is you got to get this guy signed. You don't want to go through all this, give up a prospect like Brandstrom, who should be easily a top 4 player, and then just watch him walk.
Yeah, no, you can't do that. But I look, credit though to George McPhee here, because although Brandstrom, I agree with you, he's going to be a star. Like, they didn't give up a first-round pick. They wound up giving a second-round pick for Mark Stone, who, I'll tell you something. I've watched Vegas for the last month. They needed something. They needed something big. They were not performing well, even with the additions of Stosny and Pacioretty. Their top line. We found out that Willie Karlsson isn't a 42-goal scorer. He's probably a 25 to 30, but this team was not playing well. A great shot in the arm. Now you go into the playoffs. Your second line is Pacioretty, Stosny, and Stone. And me and Dave are going, oh, wow, that's a pretty decent second line. So great get for McPhee. I agree with you. They had to sign him because you can't bring in that and leverage all your assets. And the scary thing about Vegas, if you look at the board, if you go to Cap Friendly, you see what they have picks left. They have their first rounders. They have 3 second rounders or 3 third rounders, I think, in this upcoming draft. So they still have assets, but it was a necessary move for Vegas because they really need something. They're 10, 12 points behind both San Jose and Calgary, and they were playing at that level. Now this makes them a much more dangerous team from the playoffs.
Yeah, no question. I mean, they were feeding off the juice, I think, of last year, and they kind of, I think, schemed their way. A great job. The synergy from the front office down through the coach onto the ice was just excellent. And some of that was lost this year, and I think, like you were saying, they were reinvigorated. But Dave, you look at what happened with Winnipeg. Now, Winnipeg had a couple almost catches there, but they definitely, of course, got Kevin Hayes from the New York Rangers. What can you tell us about that acquisition?
Yeah, well, it solidifies themselves, their team up the middle. It really did. It's the same thing they did last season when they brought in Paul Stastny. They wanted to solidify 3 legit lines with 3 legit centers. And they get that in Kevin Hayes. Now, maybe he'll flip-flop between him and Brian Little between lines 2 and 3. He has the ability to play wing, so you've improved your power play automatically by bringing in this type of a talent because you can spread things out a little bit more come the man advantage. This was a move that they wanted to make. They weren't willing to give up the price to pay to get Mark Stone in there. And I don't really believe they were truly in there from an extension perspective. I'm sure they explored it, but with the guys that they have on that roster that need extensions, that need new deals, I think they were more comfortable with them and perhaps adding smaller pieces. They can convince Kevin Hayes to stick around after this season, and he's going to be coming in at significantly less than what Mark Stone is making. So this solidifies things not only for them now, but it gives them a good edge in trying to lure this player to Winnipeg in the offseason. I can tell you, the New York Rangers did not offer him a contract, is my understanding. They had talks, and they went back to the drawing board. We know there were reports last week that they went back to the drawing board with him and Zuccarello. Neither guy got an official offer. So it was clear that they weren't going to be signing there for whatever the reason, and maybe the Rangers revisit in the offseason. But my indication was that both guys were a little disappointed that they weren't officially offered something from the Rangers, and they kind of knew that the writing was on the wall for Winnipeg. Great opportunity to get an edge come July 1st, but also improve your team and deepen your team even more come playoff time. Because I tell you, the ads and the improvements that Nashville made, Winnipeg definitely needed to do something before they, were left with nothing. So it was a good ad for them.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Hayes, Winnipeg has had a problem at that second/third line center spot where Little has not been quite up to that second line level. Now they have a lot more in the way of options. Whoever's the hot guy could probably plug into that particular spot.
Right, and it adds some internal competition as well, which is nice. So providing these guys get along great, they're gonna be chirping each other and challenging each other to see who plays better, because the guys are going to want more ice time. Everybody's competitive. You want to win, but you're also competitive in your own environment. So this was a very, I think, shrewd and smart move by Kevin Cheveldayoff, Winnipeg's GM.
Yeah, no question. Well, DB, Dave mentioned Nashville. I guess, being a Flyers podcast, we've got to talk a little bit about what the Predators did. And adding Wayne Simmons and Michael Granlund at the cost of Kevin Fiala and Ryan Hartman with some draft picks worked in there, it looks like the Predators need a little bit of a wake-up call in their special teams, especially their power play.
Oh, yeah, they needed just a wake-up call in general. I mean, they got beat pretty soundly by St. Louis here the last couple of weeks. And now, we keep talking about Winnipeg and Nashville all season. St. Louis is in the mix. St. Louis, if they can sustain this, I'm not sure they can sustain it for another 19 games the way Binnington's playing. But if they do, they can win the division, right? So, and Nashville was another team. Here's the thing with Nashville, and you go back to Winnipeg as well. Like, these two teams are not the 117 and 114 juggernauts of last season. Like, these teams are good, but they're not fantastic. They're not great. And you could throw a blanket over the top three in the both Central and Pacific, and any team can emerge at this point in time. So Nashville was definitely another team that they're never that great offensively, right? They only had one guy really scoring goals, and that was Victor Arvidsson, who's been insane over the last month, 6 weeks since he's come back. But they needed help offensively. So to go get Granlund, which is a really good trade for Fiala. Fiala, he had that bad injury. He just never found his way after the injury in Nashville. And adding Wayne Simmons, the size and the strength to help the power play, I think it was, again, a necessary move for Nashville, because I think Nashville's window is really closing. The defense is getting a little bit older. Pekka Rinne, I think, is 35, even though he signed an extension. So this team got to the Cup final once. I think they were kind of assumptive last year. I thought they would walk back into a Cup final. They wound up losing to Winnipeg. They had to do something. This was, again, like was Winnipeg and like Vegas, this was a necessary add to add to this team. And I like the moves. I'm still not confident in this team. I think there's just that X factor that's missing with this team. I think if they went in against a Winnipeg or even a St. Louis, I wouldn't really pick them in either matchup. So it was good ads for this team. They addressed the issue of the power play, but I just think I don't see them getting to the Cup final against Tampa Bay. I'm going to be assumptive on Tampa Bay here, but I like the moves. But there's something lacking with this team. I'm not comfortable about.
Yeah. No, I could see that. There's some discussions about them moving on from somebody like PK Subban next year, the salary crunch, and things of that nature. So they want to close the deal as quickly as possible. You mentioned St. Louis. It is so funny because here in Philadelphia, we felt like we had something in common with the Blues in terms of we've had a core group intact here for a while. And I read something from Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic just like about 5 weeks ago before the Blues went on their run, where he said, I'm never going to let this core group fool us again. Doug Armstrong has to do something. Dave, maybe you want to comment. And then all of a sudden they go on this run, and you hear what DB's saying about them, like he has more confidence in them than he does in Nashville.
Yeah, well, look, two big things happened, obviously, for both of these teams, for them and to Philly. The coaching change and the young goaltending. And the young goaltending, I know Jordan Binnington very well. He lives here in Toronto. He's from here. I've had a chance to know him for the last, I think, 3 or 4 years. And he's a good kid. He's a smart kid, and just needed that opportunity. It goes back to the older mentality, not mentality, but I guess kind of just the old school ways of thinking for goaltenders. Nobody really rushed goaltenders a number of years ago. Really, Marc-Andre Fleury was the only teenager in that stretch where he was kind of just forced in there for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But you usually waited until kids were in their mid-20s before they really came into their own at the National Hockey League level and given the opportunity as a goaltender. Carter Hart's been rushed a little bit, but he's been fantastic, obviously, and unfortunately, he's got to battle that injury and then through it. But you're in your mid-20s here with Jordan Binnington, and this is exactly where these types of goaltenders, this is when they start to emerge and given that opportunity. So I'm not surprised from his perspective, but it's a combination of that working and the coaching change, readapting the style of play that's needed in the National Hockey League. With all due respect to Mike Yeo and what was happening there, Craig Berube's message and style has resonated a lot better with the core of the St. Louis Blues and with those players. And we still haven't seen Vladimir Tarasenko totally turn it up. So, this is a really good group of players. Ryan O'Reilly should be, the MVP of that team. Whether he gets that recognition on a league-wide scale, we'll obviously wait and see. But this is a very deep team, but their style just wasn't working for them. The goaltending wasn't there, and you start to second-guess yourself when that happens. Both things are clicking now, and like DB said, would I be shocked if they came out of that division as the top dog? No, I don't think so.
Wow. Yeah, I thought that when they were playing and kind of stuck in the mud, I said, they don't play fast enough. They don't look fast enough. I caught some of that game last night against Nashville. I said, this is a different team. Berube is definitely doing a good job. But, Anthony, you have an article on thefourthperiod.com about trade deadline, winners and losers 2019. Maybe we could take us through that. I look at the top in the winners category of Columbus, and maybe you could talk about some of the things they did. And boy, they were backed up against the wall.
Well, yeah, obviously I consulted with Dave and DB before writing that, but I think the overwhelming favorite is that it was Columbus. There was so much heat surrounding them. Were they going to be sellers? Were they going to sell on Panarin and Bobrovsky? But I give so much credit to Jarmo Kekalainen that he believes in this group. He went out and got Dzingel, he got Duchesne, he added depth in Adam McQuaid. He realized that Bobrovsky has had a shady run in the playoffs. He adds Kincaid. I just really like what he did, saying that, we have a good team here, and maybe next year if these two guys leave, we'll take a step back. But he tells his core now that he believes in it, and he adds a lot of good players, a lot of good pieces. And this year, the Metro Division is as wide open as it's ever been. So I think he loaded his team up to take a really good run at coming out of that Metro Division.
Yeah. TD, what'd you think about what Jarmo was faced with? I mean, going with two guys that you knew that you're going to lose and backs up against the wall there.
Yeah, well, I've said repeatedly on the Off the Rush show, you couldn't trade those two players. From an emotional standpoint, to do it to that market, to really dash the hopes of the fans, you trade those two people. I get you want to get some assets. These guys are going to walk away. But, again, this is a team that's never won a playoff round. It's more important. It's teams like them and Buffalo that haven't had success for a long time. Not that Buffalo's going to get in at this point. But this team has to go for it, right? And then they win this round, win two rounds. And let's not forget, last season, that they had Washington where they wanted them. They were up 2-0, double overtime. Lars Eller scores the goal. They wound up coming back. But they had the team down. So this is a good team. I love, nobody talks about Cam Atkinson enough. I mean, with all the talk about Panarin and Dubois and stuff, Cam Atkinson is one of my favorite players in the league. A 30-goal scorer, a heart and soul guy. So this is they had to do this. They had to go for it. And what fans have to understand, this is not just Columbus, all fans. At some point, you're going to have players who are going to walk away and they get nothing for it. And I always go back and reference this team called the Islanders is doing okay without John Tavares. Right, so it is possible if you draft and develop like that, you can continue to have, you're going to lose players, but you're going to have replacement players. You're going to sign free agents, whatever. It's unfortunate. Panarin is a all-world player. He's going to help some team next season, either on the West Coast or the East Coast. But it's something that Kekalainen has to do. So I applaud him for holding on to those two players, trying to give it a run. And again, the question is how much do you want to buy? Because at the end of the road, you're looking at Tampa Bay. So if I'm an East Conference GM, I'm not giving up. That's why I like what Lou did, because Lou probably set the prices. But I said, okay, we're never going to get best Tampa. We might get out of our division. So this is a true Stanley Cup run. So I like what Kekalainen did, and I commend him for holding on and adding to this team, trying in an effort to win at least the first couple of playoff rounds in Columbus.
Yeah. I believe in their drafting, too. Clearly, they did. They had the stones to go after Dubois and pass on Puljujarvi. And, Dave, that looked like the right move.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they viewed him as a legit franchise number one center. And, everybody also was of the inkling that it was going to take him a little bit of time to develop, to thicken up. he's a big kid, but he needed to thick up a little bit. He needed to gain some muscle. It's going to take some time to adjust at the NHL level. But this was a player. Look, when Columbus was trying to get Max Pacioretty last season from the Montreal Canadiens, the ask was Dubois, and Yarmo just said, forget about it. So pick somebody else, and then ultimately it didn't work out. There's been a ton of interest in this kid because they view him as going to be a legit number one center in the National Hockey League. This deepens them significantly. Now you drop him a little bit. You bring him down to the two line. That Panarin, Duchesne, Atkinson first line is absolutely lethal. And to see what Duchesne can do with two pure goal scorers on his line is going to be fun to watch going down the stretch. So, I agree with DB. It would have been totally ridiculously hard to move one of those two guys, or especially both of them, in Panarin and Sergei Bobrovsky, and not keep the room strong and not keep things like that. I'll say this, though. So from talking to a few sources there close to the team in Columbus, I could tell you Panarin was impressed with the additions Kekalainen made. How that affects, his decision in the summer, obviously we'll wait and see. But I could tell you he was happy with the additions that were made there.
Yeah, I could see that. It was a ballsy move. I mean, there's no question.
It was. And we don't see enough of that in the national. Dennis and I talk about this all the time. A lot of these guys, these GMs, there's too much risk involved, and they take that too much into account. Not enough stones out there for guys to just go after it and take that chance. And the Columbus Blue Jackets, without a doubt, are doing that, and I commend them.
Well, I do too. I mean, a lot of it, like DB was saying, that playoff revenue would really be nice in Columbus if they could win a round or two. That would be fantastic. I'm kind of rooting for them because I don't think the Flyers are going to make it. But DB, before we get to the Flyers, let's talk about another winning team in Anthony's article. The San Jose Sharks bolstered themselves with the acquisition of Gustav Nyquist from Detroit Red Wings. How do they look going into the playoffs, in your opinion?
Well, it's going to come down to one. Look, I love the add by Nyquist. I think he fits in with their scheme. Pete DeBoer is a great coach. He'll figure out a way to get them. Their challenge is always what? Depth scoring in the playoffs. So Nyquist will come in. I think he'll do a really nice job. It's a really easy room to get acclimated to. Remember, Evander Kane came in last year. The guys loved him. He loved them. He wound up signing a long-term deal. It's coming down to one player for San Jose, Martin Jones. If he doesn't play goal well, they'll be out in the first round. They're going to have a difficult matchup against, I assume they're going to play Vegas. And going into that matchup, they don't have the better goaltender. Pound for pound, Marc-Andre Fleury's better. If Martin Jones isn't a .925, .930 save percentage goaltender in the playoffs, it's going to be a short run for the San Jose Sharks, which is dangerous because you don't have Erik Karlsson signed. You don't have Joe Pavelski signed. Who knows what Joe Thornton's going to go. So they've really got to go for it at this point in time. So and look, that said, are they one of the six to get to the Cup final? Absolutely they could. But Martin Jones has to be the man. He can't play the way he's played the first 60 games of the season. They will not go through. They might get past Vegas in the first round. They will not go 4 rounds with Martin Jones playing average hockey. He has to be at his best for them to emerge.
Yeah, I mean, he was amazing in their Cup run year. I thought he did a really great job. It really reflected well on Doug Wilson, but this year, like you're saying, he's not been doing that well. Dave, another team I thought might reach out and at least try to get some goaltending help was the Calgary Flames, and they pretty much stood pat unless I missed something. I was thinking maybe the Flyers, Brian Elliott, was somebody they wouldn't mind taking another look at if they didn't have confidence in what they had going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and credit Mike Smith for stepping up and recognizing that he needed to be better because he has been better the last couple of weeks here in the National Hockey League. So I give him a ton of credit because they absolutely needed him to be better. Because not only for the team's sake, overall from a standings perspective, they needed to give David Riddick a bit of a bump. They needed to give him a little bit of an eye opener to say, hey, we need both of you guys to be better. If not, we're going to go get a goaltender, which means Mike Smith is the odd man out, but he's also going to be pushing you for top minutes as a number one goaltender. Mike Smith said, no, I don't want anything to do with that, and stepped up. Now, they hope he continues and maintains this performance because they need him. And if he wants to keep playing in the National Hockey League, even in a backup role, he's got to step up and continue to step up. David Riddick's their guy, but they need quality goaltending from both guys, whoever's between the pipes. Smith's got the experience, so he stepped up and showed him that, yeah, he can hold the fort when called upon. That was that's ultimately what made the decision why they did not pursue Jimmy Howard further.
Right.
So you give credit there, and then from a roster perspective up front, yeah, you get a guy in Oscar Vandenberg that Dennis is definitely very familiar with, as a 6'7" defenseman to kind of come in, and you hope that the James Neal that has not shown up in the regular season, and you can argue it's because of his positioning, but you hope from a Calgary standpoint that the James Neal in the playoffs definitely shows up come April.
Yeah. Well, what is it with James Neal? What do you mean in terms of positioning? I mean, where is that in the lineup?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody thought he was going to get those top line minutes, and Elias Lindholm deservingly, jumped in front of him, and that slotted James Neal down to the third line. So he wasn't getting quality minutes. He wasn't getting what he expected going into this season. And, you look at this and you go, well, okay, understandably, he's not getting the top minutes and the top assignments. So it's going to, it's going to affect his performance from an offensive perspective. But come playoff time, when teams zero in on that top line, lines 2 and 3 are going to be the ones that are going to be the difference makers. And from Calgary's perspective, you hope to see a James Neal be in a position where he's going to basically shut everybody up and silence the critics and say, yeah, you know what, crappy regular season, but I'm here to play. I'm here to mean business.
Oh yeah, he'll be a regular Gene Tennis, in hockey terms. But Lindholm has just been terrific. What a great trade that was. Who saw that coming though? But
no, and it and that was funny because
Don Waddell didn't see it coming.
Yeah,
no,
Don Waddell doesn't see anything coming.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really get along, him and Lindholm and Peters in Carolina. So I didn't really expect that one to work out too well. But it's clear that it certainly did.
Yeah. Anybody want to take a shot at whether the Toronto Maple Leafs did enough by getting Jake Muzzin?
No.
It doesn't seem like they're all in.
No, they needed to go get Wayne Simmons.
Yeah.
So then, is they going to get pushed around by Boston or somebody or Washington if they run into them?
Well, Boston's not going to be afraid of them, right? And
No.
Mentally they're going to have the advantage over Toronto. If anything goes wrong in the first round, like they're so fragile, Toronto, mentally, they needed the toughness of Wayne Simmons. They needed his presence in front of them. That they needed his locker room presence as well. Jake's a championship, defenseman. He's won 2 rings, but I think that was the miss for them. I would have outbid Nashville for them because I'm not confident this team. They're very, very talented, and they could go through Boston. But, in the Game 6 and the Game 7, when it's down, it's 3-2, and you're facing Bergeron and Marchand, and when Pasternak comes back, I just think that this team, and they really should have loaded up because they're going to have all these salary cap issues next year. So I think Dave agrees. I think I would have went for Simmons, and I don't think they've done enough here. I think they could easily be eliminated in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. No, I mean, look, I really like the addition of Muzzin. He's been able to toss the body around a little bit, and he's been well. He's played well for them, but they needed more. They truly needed that better right shot defenseman, and they needed more than an addition of Nick Petan up front to solidify the bottom 6. There's not enough jam in that lineup, and there's not enough defensive responsibility in that overall lineup. Everybody talks about how great of a head coach Mike Babcock is, and he's a great coach. If he has one flaw, it's for at least the Maple Leafs anyway, it's the lack of defensive awareness. And this is not a very good defensive team the way that they're structured. They can run and gun all day, but if Freddie Anderson stumbles a little bit, if he's having an off night, he needs the guys in front of him to help bail him out. And I haven't seen that this season on a consistent basis.
But they
so
wait
I
a
would
minute.
have liked
Don't they have the greatest coach in the world ever?
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah. So that's what everybody up here says anyway.
Defense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think?
And Jake Muzzin can play on us offside, right? Oh, no, we can't. But,
Right.
yeah, I got to bring up another player who was in the mold of Wayne Simmons, who was ultimately decided that it was better from the Carolina perspective to hang on to, was Michael Furland. And apparently he was pursued by the Nashville Predators, who might have made a similar offer that ended up getting them Wayne Simmons.
Yeah, I mean, well, Carolina's price tag on him was more than, at least in my opinion, more. They wanted a first-round pick as part of a deal for Michael Furland. And there weren't that many teams that were willing to give that up. From Toronto's perspective, they didn't have it this year because they traded it for Muzzin. They didn't want to go back-to-back years without a first, especially for a potential rental. So, and obviously Nashville and Winnipeg kicked some tires on them, and there were a few other teams, San Jose as well. But this was a team in Carolina that's in the thick of things in the playoffs. They wanted to and were willing to move one of Brett Pesce, Justin Falk, and Dougie Hamilton for some firepower up front. They weren't able to do that, so they hold on to Michael Furland, who really wants to stay there. I can tell you that firsthand. He likes it there, wants to stay. It's just a matter of figuring out that contract, and maybe he ups his performance a little bit more. Maybe he ups it throughout the playoffs if they can make it, and they can figure out an extension then. But Carolina, unless it was something that they felt they couldn't say no to, they were obviously comfortable holding on to him.
Yeah, he's just got to stay healthy. That's the one bugaboo with Michael Furland. But so the Kings did not trade Jeff Carter and some other players who might have been available. Where are they at right now?
They are a mess right now. You watched the game last night in Carolina. You saw Jonathan Quick go right at the bench at Willie Desjardins. So
yes.
When he failed to ask for a review of the goaltender interference on the first goal. And now I've talked to guys, a bunch of guys after that. Look, the point was that it wasn't goaltender interference, but that's Jonathan Quick. That's your guy. That's your warrior. You have to have his back. So you have to ask, and in a season that means nothing at this point, you have to. If he asks you, you have to go and review it to have the guy's back. He didn't do that. So what does it mean? It means that Willie Desjardins is not coming back. Obviously, this team has not responded. You can see their attitude on the ice. This is going to be as crucial an off-season in Los Angeles as has been in over a decade. This is that Rob Blake really has to make some massive changes. He's got to get right on the coach, and he's got to move players out. Jeff Carter, at some point in time, as we understand him, he did a lot of legwork on Monday. There were no calls for Jeff Carter. Right? His game has turned so poor this year that there was no interest. Right? Even at a discount, you couldn't even have a conversation about Jeff Carter if you're Rob Blake because nobody called. Right?
Wow.
Kyle Toffoli, we reported, was close to being dealt. I think it was the Bruins, and then Jonathan Quick. I don't see how Jonathan Quick, given the play of Cal Peterson and Jack Campbell, how he's on the team next season. So I think there's going to be major changes. There could be some other moves as well, but this team is in disarray right now. The leadership core, I don't think management and ownership is satisfied with the job they've done because you watch this team without any enthusiasm, without any fire, night in, night out for the last month. And I know they're out of the race. But there has to be basically a come to Jesus meeting with the leadership and say, hey, look, things have to change. We have to start playing harder. And there has to be significant changes. So I think when you go to – I think that Rob Blake will be, if not the most active, but one of the most active GMs at the draft table in Vancouver. Now, I don't expect Quick to be on the team. If they can find a taker for Carter, even at a reduced price, they'll move out his cap and play in the free agency. The other guy would be Tyler Toffoli, but they're probably going to have to get a first-round pick and a prospect back for him. So I think there has to be significant changes here. If they want to go and play in the free agency, and Panarin, I'm sure, would love to play in Los Angeles. He has a Russian compatriot here in Ilya Kovalchuk, who I don't think is going to go anywhere because he controls his destiny. So I think there's going to be significant changes here, but it has to start with the attitude on the ice. The leadership group has to really rekindle themselves and get back and understand what it's like to commit and play hard, even when you're not in the race, to be a professional. You watch games like last night in Carolina, after playing well in Tampa. So it's as low point as there's been in the decade. And it's up to Rob Blake and Luke Robitaille to fix it, to sit down with the players, and then figure out what you're going to do with this roster in the offseason.
Yeah. Minus 51 goal differential, only topped by Anaheim, I believe.
Yeah.
Just brutal. Flyers were only halfway there. But listen, I have to talk about the Flyers, of course, and what a better lead-in than today's article, which really caught people by surprise, that the Flyers, and again, we're talking about Jonathan Quick, tried to upgrade their goaltending again. Maybe one of you guys could give us what's the whole background? Were they not impressed with Talbot, or what variables came into play there?
Well, I think first of all, Talbot hasn't played, so I believe he's starting tomorrow against Jersey, or Friday against Jersey. So it'll give them a first-hand look in a game situation, which would be nice before you make that type of evaluation. But look, Elliott's a free agent, Talbot's a free agent. As much as Talbot could potentially help, Hart down the stretch, I think the focus now is next season and a little bit beyond. And our understanding is that Fletcher was looking to bring in a goaltender that is a number one and has term on his contract. So he was obviously exploring multiple guys. Not exactly sure who all the guys were. But somebody that could be there, that's got a few years left on his contract, that can help mentor and coach Hart along the way, rather than just throwing him into the fire, because it can be a lot for a young kid to go through that. And if you're especially expecting him to be the number one guy and the savior right off the bat, that's a lot. So if you can bring in somebody that can help ease that pressure off, a 1A, 1B scenario type thing to mentor this kid along, might not be the best situation for the goalie that you might be acquiring, but hey, it is what it is. But Fletcher was absolutely looking and exploring at some options. I can definitely confirm that without a shred of a doubt. But he wasn't there yet, so you could certainly see that being something that he might focus on in the off season, perhaps around the draft for the Flyers.
And I'll build on that by saying that I would not be shocked if they explore Jonathan Quick. I would not be surprised at all if they went and explored him. And again, people say he's got 4 years left on his deal, but remember, the expansion draft is coming up, right? So so you could have Jonathan for a couple of years and then go in, and not a better guy to mentor a championship goaltender who could certainly help Carter Hart find the way and play goal the right way and do all those things you need to be a winner. So it wouldn't shock me if they made a phone call at the draft to see what was going on and what the acquisition price was for him.
Okay, so Jonathan Quick is a super competitive guy, almost. But if you listen to somebody like Russ Cohen, who's here locally, that he seems to think that Quick has gone from that Brett Favre attitude with Aaron Rodgers coming in to maybe more accepting of where he's at in his career. Would you say that's accurate?
I know Jonathan Quick pretty well. He doesn't accept anything. I think that he still wants to win. He still burns to win. What you watched last night, though? That game meant nothing, meaningless. And he's angry and he's burning that his coach doesn't have his back. So he still burns to win. He's so competitive. That's a guy you want on your team. That's the guy and they would miss that aspect. If he does move on, and I suspect he will from LA, they're going to miss that aspect in the locker room. So to have that kind of player who's won championships in any room, regardless if it's Philly or anybody, right, is a plus here. So I think he's more accepting of the situation where the team is, where it isn't as good. He's not willing to. I don't think he's willing to take a step back at this point in time. If he had to share the load, that's fine. It's the fact of life. He has guaranteed contract. The one thing about Jonathan, he has no trade protection. So they could send him anywhere they want, right? He has no say in the situation. So I don't think he's taking a step back with respect to his drive or his willingness to be a 1A or a 1B. He knows he's won championships. It's almost time to pass the baton. It is time to pass the baton. in Los Angeles because of the salary cap situation where you have two guys on entry-level deals in Peterson and Campbell, so he's going to save $5 million a year. So whoever's going to get him is still going to get a guy who burns to play. I mean, Jonathan, I think, is the type of guy who will burn to play until the final day of his final year of his contract. So I don't think there's any question about his motivation or his willingness to compete and succeed, because you see in a season like this where it's hopelessly lost, he's still angry. He still wants to win. He's still frustrated.
Right. So to put in proper context the Talbot acquisition, it would be, I guess, proper to say Stolarz was not a guy that they were really sold on. He was going to be a UFA because of a technicality in his contract, so they wanted to take a test drive with Talbot while still having in the back of their mind if they could get a better 1A, 1B situation with Carter Hart, then that's what they're still looking for. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the injury to Hart plays a factor in all of this. You know, that perhaps this was their off-season game plan that got sped up a little bit because of the injury to Hart. But, you know, ultimately, you know, our belief, our understanding is that's going to be something they're going to look at, you know, come summertime because they've escalated things now. So, you know, they wanted Talbot in there to be alongside Hart along the way in game situations. They obviously weren't able to trade Brian Elliott. And look, this is not the most ideal situation for any of these goaltenders. I can tell you Brian Elliott's not happy. I know, you know, I'm sure Cam Talbot's not happy about this. Playing, instead of sharing the duties and playing every second game, these guys are now going to be playing every third game, effectively. That's not what you want if you're a goaltender in the National Hockey League, and somebody that's used to carrying, you know, the load as much as you can, as guys like Talbot and Elliott have gone through. But they're UFAs at the end of the season. Certainly looks like the writing's on the wall in terms of their careers as number one goaltenders. You know, it certainly looks like they're going to be primarily number twos. They're going to be backups from now on, but, you know, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. We know there were some other teams that were interested. I know Carolina, we talked about them. Carolina had interest in Talbot before he was traded over to Philly. So, you know, maybe that was an area they were looking at, and maybe that's something in the summer if Talbot hits the UFA market, like I suspect he will. You can see teams like Carolina that might knock on the door to explore that. But from Philly's perspective, definitely not going to be surprising when they go shopping for a legit number one that they feel will carry the bulk of the burden as Hart develops properly.
Okay, so it sounds like they're looking to slow that down a little bit. Maybe they ran him into the ground a little bit this year.
Yeah, and look, this is a totally different situation. You can't really compare his situation because he's in his early 20s to or just about to Jordan Binnington in St. Louis, who's 25. He's had pro hockey experience at the ECHL, at the AHL level. He's had that. And he had a one gamer a few years ago when St. Louis called him up. So he had at least a bit of an NHL experience there, but he had AHL experience for a couple of seasons before he made this jump. So totally different scenarios here. So you don't want to rush this kid. They definitely don't want to screw him up. So proceed with caution until they feel, he's 24 years old. All right, now here are the keys. You can run with this consistently.
Gotcha. Just a couple other things with the Flyers. Any action on a UFA like Michael Raffl or some defensemen that were under contract like Shane Gostisbehere or Radko Gudas? Anything close, or maybe some seeds planted for the summer?
It could be. Yeah, definitely could be. There were talks. There was some action on them, but nothing that obviously moved the needle. Shane Gostisbehere is going to be a guy that I would keep an eye on come summertime. There were talks earlier on in the season about, if Philly would move him. They engaged in some of those discussions, and with and there's two variables here. One, Fletcher's made it known he wants to bring in a veteran presence on that back end.
Right.
With all the kids that are there, somebody's got to go. So you got to try to maximize value. It's a down season for Gostisbehere. I don't think last season was a fluke in his 60-plus point year. But maybe it's not that. Maybe he's not going to be hitting 60 every season. I think he certainly had a rough one this year. but he still has a ton of value. So you might want to sell high on this guy come summertime because you've got so many other kids on that blue line that are going to be coming up and eventually emerging, out there. So I think that he's going to certainly, because you've got that asset, because Fletcher has said that he wants to bring in a veteran blue liner to help mentor some of these kids along the way. I wouldn't be surprised come summertime if we see a guy like Gostisbehere as somebody that's moved out, perhaps to upgrade themselves up front a little bit deeper.
Gotcha. Are there any other Flyers that are kind of like on shaky ground, or maybe not so much shaky ground, but maybe the Flyers are taking a lot of calls on that might be more interesting, that would surprise people?
I'm not too sure, DB. I don't know if you've been hearing some other stuff on that, but that maybe I know there were some teams that, and this happens everywhere. Teams call LA and ask about Drew Doughty. Teams call the Edmonton Oilers and say if they trade Leon Draisaitl. Teams are going to call. Teams have called about Voracek. Doesn't mean these players are going to be traded by any stretch. But when you're on a downward swing, teams try to take advantage of the situation and try to pry. So, maybe because of Philly's situation, because, he's got a big cap hit, maybe a player like Jakub Voracek is a guy that they explore come summertime. I'm not, and this is just, again, don't take this for anything other than talk.
Sure.
But if anyone, I would suspect maybe that's the type of a player that teams are going to call and Philly might listen in on. But I don't think there's an urgency by any stretch to move that type of a player. DB, I don't know if you're hearing anything else.
Yeah, you look at their roster, it's pretty set. There's no real guy that sticks out to me because the big tag guys are out there moving. JVR just got there. So I think that, at least with respect to the forwards, the big question here is the goaltending, right? And I agree with Dave. I think the biggest move is to bring in a 1 or 1A or whatever you want to call it. I think the rest of this roster is pretty solidified. I agree with Dave on the need for a veteran defenseman to help mentor these kids, but I don't see any big move here, Isaiah, to move any of these guys out. It would be unexpected at this point in time. I don't expect, like Dave says, his old saying that we have at TFP is that 98% of the players get talked about, 2% get traded. Right?
Right.
I don't see the one target here where you're going to say, okay, we need to lift this guy off this roster and get that. I agree with Dave on Voracek, but the price tag is too big. They start to pay wingers $8.2 million. I got a winger out here in Anaheim that's making $8.2 million a year named Corey Perry. And, I see that. I don't see the value. I see really no value at all. So I don't really see the player that people are targeting off the Flyers roster that would be on another team who's a significant contributor this season.
Gotcha. I can tell you that a pretty well-placed source had the Hextall regime, of course it's changed now, pretty determined to move on from Voracek if they could. I don't know how Fletcher has analyzed that, but that was the discussion point. But, of course, Ron Hextall is gone, so everything is back to evaluation period. Well, I don't know what to say, but we've run out of time. Thank you so much for coming on. Let's get some of the contact information, starting with UTB. You beat Dave on there. Where can people follow you on Twitter and other places?
Yeah, okay, so it's Dennis TFP either on Twitter or on Instagram. I'm not that huge an Insta guy, but so Instagram, and then obviously I have my column at thefourthperiod.com where you can always follow me. We have SiriusXM Off the Rush from 11 to 1 Eastern every Saturday, and as people know, if they follow me on Twitter, I'm probably on the radio about 95 times a week anyway. So if you want to find me, there's plenty of ways to find me.
Fantastic. Dave?
Yeah, doing the same, obviously, with Off the Rush every week, and, of course, thefourthperiod.com, and a bunch of radio hits throughout both the U.S. and Canada throughout the course of the week. And Instagram is just my name, David Pagnotta, and of course on Twitter at the Fourth Period. Check us out. Is crunch time now for this playoff rush, so it should be exciting.
Yeah, you got to check out thefourthperiod.com. These guys are great. And gentlemen, thank you for doing this. Hope we can do this again very soon.
All right,
Thanks,
sounds good.
Appreciate
Thanks
the
for having
time,
us.
buddy. No problem.
All right.
Great job.
Take care. Well, let's get some quick reaction before we wrap up for the night. Anthony, let's go to you first with your compatriots. What in there maybe caught you off guard, surprised you?
Well, when they came up with the article about the Flyers are still looking to upgrade the goaltending, that kind of caught me off guard. I think when they acquired Talbot, I thought that's what they were kind of hoping for the next few years, a Hart-Talbot tandem. But to hear that they're still maybe inquiring on guys like Quick or someone of that stature, that caught me off guard a lot. So I have a lot of talking to do with my colleagues. Yeah, absolutely. We have a question here from one of our listeners. He's Paul. I don't want to attempt the last name because I'll mess it up, but he's on Twitter at GoalieZilla41. He had a couple questions. I think we're in your bailiwick there. Where is the light at the end of the tunnel for the Flyers? I think he's asking, like, has the Flyers organization taken a hit that they're not considered a really attractive place for UFAs, and the Flyers are going to have to end up overpaying? Is that a jaundiced view, or the Flyers still have a very good reputation, in your opinion? I think that in the grand scheme of things, they still have a good reputation. You know, they've always been a winning organization, but you can't ignore the fact that this team has not won a playoff series since 2012. They've only made the playoffs three times since then. And I really think that although teams will still like the idea of being a Flyer, they still have to turn this around. I do think that Fletcher is going to try and shift that narrative around the Flyers. I expect them to be very active come this summer, but I think the Flyers really have to do a bit of hard working here to bring back the prestige that once surrounded this organization.
That begs the question, and it's another question from the same listener. Is Joe Quenneville still going to find this an attractive opportunity, or any big-name coach? And do you think that the Flyers are going to pursue that type of new mentor?
I think they will. Like, I have it on good authority from someone close to the organization that Dave Scott had brought up Quenneville's name specifically numerous times dating back to when Hextall was still in power. Now, it's kind of believed that Quenneville wanted to take the year off. I personally think that the Flyers will take another hard run at Quenneville. I think that in a perfect world, they'll like to do that. I think the Flyers want to be relevant again. I think they want to go back to a team that is taken seriously, and I think that starts with the guy behind the bench. I really think that Fletcher is feeling the pressure from the guys above him, not for his job, obviously, but I think that when he took the job, they made it known that they want him to turn this team into a roster that can compete now. And I think they will take a hard run at Quenneville.
Yeah, I mean, you look what Barry Trotz was able to do and on the island, and you see with some of these teams, we mentioned it in other shows. Let me get to some of my regular crew members here. Dan, it doesn't take, we've said this on other shows, it doesn't take you 5-7 years anymore to turn these teams around.
No, not at all. And again, I think that comes down to, what needs to happen this summer. I think Chuck Fletcher has a whole lot on his plate, and hopefully that he can, figure out a way to maneuver, the salary cap. They're going to have a whole lot of room to play with, and hopefully that they can land somebody, maybe get rid of a bigger fish like Voracek and have a little bit of extra room there, and, make a run at some big players and try and turn this organization around real quick. They got a whole bunch of kids coming up in the next year or two, Frost and Ratcliffe and all these guys should be here in the next, next season, maybe the season after, depending on how much seasoning they get in the AHL. But the time is now to really start making a run, and hopefully Fletcher starts to pull that trigger this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Chef?
Well, I kind of concur a little bit with that, but I also have to say too, if you're going to make any kind of run with G, some of the other players that core we questioned, not even take Jake Voracek even out of that out of the picture, you're still going to have to make significant moves this summer in order to make that happen within that 2 to 3 year mark. Otherwise, you're just wasting their prime years.
Yeah, there's no question. Everything the Flyers do, Anthony, we're talking about this on our live show. Everything the Flyers do has to be viewed through the prism of the fact that Claude Giroux has about 4, maybe 5 good years left. Otherwise, you look back at what Hextall did when he took over. He probably should have traded everybody and torn it down to the studs.
Yeah, I agree. I think Hextall really tried to toe that line, and he did it a bit too long where he neglected the current core. Look, Wayne Simmons is already gone. So I would fully expect Fletcher to go after a guy like Erik Karlsson. And to be honest, I wouldn't mind adding a guy like Erik Karlsson. Sure, we have a bunch of young defensemen, but I think adding a guy like Karlsson would instantaneously put this team to the top of the mark in that Metro division. I think they really have to hit a home run with G here. As you mentioned, they have at best 4 or 5 years left of him. And I think that he is arguably one of the best players this team has had over the last 2 decades, if not the best player. I think the Flyers can't neglect Claude Giroux. I think they have to capitalize on the good pieces they have in place, make some significant adds. They have a ton of cap room. It seems as though they have the goalie. I think if Fletcher plays his cards right, the Flyers could be contenders as soon as next year.
Yeah, the Claude Giroux is definitely the best player the Flyers have had since the Lindros era, so I would concur with that. And gentlemen, with that, we're going to wrap things up. I just want to thank everybody who came out to see us at Steam Pub at our event this past Sunday. We had a great time with our friends from PhillySportsNetwork.com, the Daily Puck, and with a little hand from Wildfire Radio. The Flyers have 2 games coming up tomorrow night. Columbus. They're in Columbus to face the Blue Jackets, the fortified Blue Jackets. And then the next night, hopefully we'll see Cam Talbot in New Jersey. And then they play the Islanders in Washington back home. So it's going to be busy. We'll probably be back Tuesday, March the 12th. But either way, if you could help us out by subscribing to the OMB Puckcast on one of our 5 formats, iTunes, SoundCloud, TuneIn, you know the rest, and the PhillySportsNetwork.com YouTube channel. We really appreciate it. And with that, let's go. The Flyers aren't out of it yet. They have a 2.1% chance of making it. Hopefully by the time we talk to you again, they won't be eliminated. Anyway, until next time, everybody, take care.